Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the National Police Association podcast. I thought I'd start this year off with somebody that you've met before. I've had him on the show before, but as we approach the year's end, and I looked at the officers killed in the line of duty statistics, the officers shot, the officers assaulted. I thought there is no better guy in this country to talk about all of this than my next guest. So, welcome back, Chief Scott Hughes.
Hey, thanks for having me, Betsy. It's an honor to be here.
Hey, so I just want to remind everybody, tell me again why you became a cop.
Well, you get the same answer I told you last time. I don't know. It's just something I've always wanted to do. I have a picture of me when I was about 9 years old at a Kmart back when they existed at a photo lab, and I had a little badge clipped on my collar, and it was at that point that I guess it was decided what I was going to be when I grew up. But honestly, my father was in the Marine Corps, and I always had a sense of wanting to give back to the community and serve the community. So I think it comes from him.
So you're not only chief of police, but you're a national level police trainer. You're an author and you're a consultant. One of the things that you're doing now is you're a an expert witness where you testify about things like a police officer's use of force. So you're a pretty busy guy, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of incidents out there happen across the country, and there's a lot of litigation, and it certainly keeps me busy. But I'll tell you, there's nothing better than still being a cop and getting to go out there and wear the uniform and work with the men and women who do what my friend calls the hardest job in America. I absolutely love it. Still do.
Oh, absolutely. So this year, one of the reasons that we wanted to talk was for the first time since 1897 in the United States, we have had less than 100 line of duty police officer deaths in this country. And you and I as trainers, this is something that has been on our radar for years and years and years. And this is something that some mutual friends of ours started to talk about, a decade or so ago. Why
Mhm.
can't we get to below 100? And that became a movement, didn't it, in law
It did.
enforcement training?
Yeah, it did. Kind of build on this philosophy that complacency kills. Slow down when you're driving, wear your seatbelt. Remember the fundamentals of this job. And I always, as I travel the country speaking, teaching, and writing, I like to harp on the fundamentals, and I think it applies in all aspects of your life, not just tactically, but as a leader, just whatever it is that you're doing. If you remember the fundamentals, good chance that things are going to work out okay. And I think I don't want to speak for below 100, but I believe the thought process behind it was, what can we do? What message can we get out there that officers will remember and they'll take with them? So things like slow down, wear your seatbelt, wear your vest, etc., are easy for officers to remember. And there's not one of us who's wearing a badge today that hasn't made a mistake. And unfortunately, 98 of our brothers and sisters this year are no longer with us, and your thoughts and prayers to their agencies and their families. For those of us that have made mistakes and we're still here to talk about it, I feel like it's our obligation that we have to make our profession better, and no better way than remembering those fundamentals and teaching to the next generation, if you will. So I think there's a lot of reasons why we got below 100, which I think we're going to dive into here soon. um, but yeah, back to your original point, this below 100 movement's been around for a long time, and I know the folks who were the founding fathers, if you will, of that, have certainly got to be proud that they got to see this actually happen.
I'll be honest, I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime.
Yeah, me. Yeah.
I'm old enough to be your older sister. And when I started, we had lost about 250 police officers in the line of duty. We saw huge losses in the 70s and on into the early 80s. And a lot of that was because we didn't have the training we have now. We barely had body armor when
Hmm.
I started, and it was a very different material than we use now. Cops were very resistant in wearing it. We didn't wear seatbelts when I
Right.
started as a police officer, and that was one of the things that below 100, that whole movement really hammered, that we have got to wear our seatbelts, not just when we're going to a hot call, but when we're on patrol, and even if you're a detective, even if you're a chief of police, right? Whenever you get in a
Right.
car, you wear your seatbelt. Slowing down, watching your speed was another thing that I didn't learn that in the police academy. My field training officer never really talked to me about that because, again, back then I started in 1980, full disclosure. One of the reasons we all became cops is we wanted to drive really fast. And
Hmm. Yeah.
it took about a decade for us to learn exactly how dangerous that was, and of course we were cognizant of getting shot. We were cognizant of getting stabbed. We also did, and we'll dive into this too, we also didn't do much in the way of first aid or self aid or
Hmm.
buddy aid when it became to being a street cop. We tended to wait for the paramedics. I'm of a generation where we were told that tourniquets were bad. They were bad for you.
Hmm.
Never use a tourniquet.
Hmm.
You're not a trained medical professional, you darn cop. So don't be putting a tourniquet on somebody. They'll lose their leg. Things like that. So much has changed in
Hmm.
the last 40 plus years, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just look at, look at the technology inside the car, right? I mean, you've got the cars now. I mean, if the car in front of you is slowing down and you're not paying attention, you get an audible noise, your seat vibrates, you get some other indication that, hey, the car in front of you is slowing down. If the vehicle starts to drift out of the lane, you get an indication that your vehicle's starting to drift. So you've got some changes inside the vehicles in of themselves that are certainly making the cars safer. You mentioned motor vehicle crashes, and I've always taught and been told that typically the top couple killers of police officers are gunfire and car crashes. And I had a friend of mine one time say this, that for every one cop that's killed in a car crash, three more are injured to the point where they sometimes can't come back on duty, that they're permanently disabled in some or disabled enough where they can't come back to full duty. So, whether or not that's a concrete statistic or not, we know what happens, right? When you drive a car for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, the likelihood of you being involved in the crash are obviously way higher. So seatbelts, obviously, I think now we're of a generation where, the kids are, I can't get in my car today and drive without my kid in the back seat saying, "Hey, Dad, your seatbelt." Right. So I think generationally we've come a long way in that respect. You've got airbags, of course, both front, side, rear, all that protection. So I think as far as car crashes and survivability, one reason why that number might be coming down is because of that. Now, having said that, we still have, unfortunately, and this is my opinion, we still have officers who are driving too fast to calls that probably don't warrant that kind of response. And the old, now I sound like the old guy, right? But the old saying, if you don't make it there alive, you're no good to anybody. And it's like everything else in life. If you drive lights and sirens to a call and you drive at breakneck speeds and nothing happens to you, you're starting to condition your brain that, hey, that's good. And then you do it again and again and again. And then unfortunately, sometimes those things catch up to you. So I think that covers automobile. I think as far as other kind of training goes, you talked about first aid. I don't know many police officers today in America that don't have a tourniquet on their belt. We've come so far with tourniquets, and so many success stories out there about the benefits of tourniquets, that certainly is another factor. You have officers now that are wearing kits on their uniforms with gauze and other things that to provide first aid until medics arrive. You've got this philosophy now that, hey, it's okay if your partner gets injured, throw him in a cruiser, hold something on him into that wound, and just drive and get him to the hospital. Don't wait for an ambulance or a life squad, because that might make a difference. So philosophical change, I think, has helped, and then certainly training. This is my big thing, Betsy. And I think the last time I was on here, I was kind of hammering we're still not doing it the right way, and I still think we have a long way to go to get to where we actually need to be as a profession. But I digress on that point to say this, that we are at least exposing our officers to the realities of the job, I think, more today than we have before. And if it's not physical hand to hand training or actually firing a gun or something like that, we're at least exposed to videos now and things online that we can see and we can watch. And I think we can learn a lot of lessons from watching others who sometimes unfortunately have maybe made a mistake or paid the ultimate sacrifice. And again, I'm a perfect example that, probably I should not be here. I've had situations happen to me that had they gone a different direction, I could have been a statistic, right? So by no means am I saying I'm perfect, because that's certainly not the case. And if I did something that was caught on video that could be a lesson for someone else, I want people to see that. So I think we're certainly seeing some changes there as well.
Well, YouTube is one big training film library for your average cop. And that's something that again, generationally has changed so much. We didn't have the body camera footage and the dash cam footage and the camera on every pole and
Hmm.
building and everything else. Now, with every single officer involved shooting, we can very quickly see those films, and those films, of course, mostly make it onto YouTube and Rumble. And
Yeah.
of course, there's always a salacious nature to that. But then, as police officers, and we've all encouraged our students to do every day, go online and watch a couple of those, talk about them at roll call, think about what would I do, what would I have done better, how would I have reacted to that. So there's the tactical aspect of those videos. There's also that mindset uh, aspect, and that's one of the great changes that I've seen in training is again, going back to the 80s when I started in scenario based training. When you got shot in a scenario based training, the scenario stopped.
Right.
So what my
Right.
generation was taught was if you get shot, you're dead.
Right.
Now, people like you have come along. What do you teach an officer when they get shot, Scott?
It's an old military saying, right? Pain is weakness leaving the body. If you're feeling pain, you're still alive. So let's go, right? We got stuff to do. We got lives to save. You'll be fine. You talked about videos real quick on YouTube. The other thing that I know in my agency, I'm proud that we do, is we're all wearing body cams, right? Everybody's got body cameras clipped on them. We at our agency, my supervisors are required to review body cam footage with every one of their officers every month. They have to review, I believe it's 3 to 5 cases. And it's not, we don't, I always get some eye rolls when I say this, because I think everybody goes to worst case scenario. But for us, it's not used to say, I got you. We use them to reinforce officer safety principles, right? So, for example, one of my sergeants will see an officer make a traffic stop at night and he doesn't slam his car door. He keeps his weapon hand free. He does a good, passenger driver side approach to the car. He does it in the right tactical manner. They'll write that up. Hey, Officer A exhibited good behavior, blah, 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 blah. And again, that is reinforcing to the officer, hey, this is the right way to be doing things. It goes back to that whole complacency kills mindset. I when I teach, I always say this. I don't like to use the word complacency because I think it's complacent to say complacency. We've heard it so much, but go across the country and just start watching videos of police officers work. Watch me work when I was a street cop. You're going to see complacency, because it's just what happens to us over time, right? So I don't like to use that word, complacency, but by reinforcing again those concepts through body cam reviews or dash cam reviews, you are reminding officers, hey, this is what is important. These are the things I need to be doing. I would love to see more agencies adopt that kind of a philosophy. You've got a great tool clipped on your chest with these body cameras. Use them to show your officers what they're doing good or where they can make changes, not just I got you moments. Because if that's all you're doing with them, then they're gonna hate going in the office to do the review, because they're just gonna be waiting for you to yell at them, or whatever the case might be, or write them up or something. But I think all of that uh, is how we get this number to stay below 100. But it has to be reinforced like anything else in life.
Well, and we're at a time period now. So we're in 2026, where really the last 5.5 years almost, police officers in this country have been demonized and vilified, and we saw a big, huge dip proactive policing,
100%. Yep.
where cops were, they were more like firefighters. They were responding to things rather than going
Right.
out
Right.
and hunting. Are you seeing, as you're traveling around the country, as you're talking to cops, as you're talking to other chiefs, are you seeing a resurgence when it comes to proactive policing?
I think so the short answer is almost like a lawyer, sort of, maybe, kind of, sometimes a little, not really. And I think it depends upon where you are, right? I mean, I have friends who work in some areas that are not so friendly to the police. When I say not so friendly, I mean politically, where they don't really have the support that they wish they had from others. So I think you see a little more reluctance in those areas. And what frustrates me about that is the police officers who are working in those jurisdictions where they don't feel that support or have that support, whether it's politically or maybe it's even the admin, which is really bad. But those officers who are working there, every one of them wants to go out and really do a good job. They took an oath. They want to go out. They want to put bad people in jail. That's what they really want to do, and they're frustrated because they can't do their jobs, right? So I think in those jurisdictions, you certainly are going to see a reduction in proactive work. I was just on a radio show a couple days ago, and a large metropolitan city here in Ohio, one day last week, they had three officers in roll call. Three for a large city in Ohio. Like, that's just unheard of. And it's, you have seen this probably more than I have around the country in these big cities. Um, they're struggling to put bodies in patrol cars. They just don't have people to work. Nobody wants to do the job. Or what's
Yeah, nine
happening?
nine out of 10 police departments in this country are still short staffed, and they're
Yeah,
mostly those big blue cities like you're talking
yeah,
about.
yeah. And what happens is, I'm in a county just north of a one of those cities and counties, and I, not necessarily my department, but departments around me, they're recruiting those officers because those are good officers down there who want to go do their job. And if they're saying, hey, if I can drive 15 miles away and be somewhere where I'm going to get support both politically, internally, and in the community, why wouldn't you? And sometimes those departments are paying better as well. But back to your original question, when you look at the deaths being below 100 and you look at gunfire, I think gunfire deaths, math was never my thing, so fact check me on this, but I think like 46% of the total officers killed were gunfire. If that 45 to 46%, if that number's accurate, and I think it's pretty close.
Yeah, it is.
One of the reasons that might be lower is because officers aren't being as proactive, right? They're not jumping out on the suspicious people on the corner. They're not making the traffic stops that maybe they might be making, trying to look for that criminal element. Because unfortunately for them, it just might not be worth it for fear of political prosecution or something like that. So again, that's unfortunate because none of us signed up for that. And I feel bad for those folks. I really feel bad for the community, because they're the ones ultimately that are suffering from that lack of proactive policing. But I think that's probably for another episode. But I do
Yeah,
think,
we have some
yeah,
crazy experiments going on, like the NYPD right now, that we're going to see how they function under a Democrat socialist mayor. And, how proactive do we think they'll be? And again, departments like New York and Chicago and LA and Portland and Seattle, and we could go on and on and on, are wildly short staffed,
yeah,
from hundreds to literally thousands of police officers short. And yet, and with all that, again, it's crazy that we were able to keep those line of duty deaths below 100. Another piece of that, I think, and we were talking about this, there were nearly 350 cops shot this year, and 90 of those were shot in 67 different ambushes. So
mm,
officer ambushes continue to rise. They've been on a 10-year trajectory going up. And so we have almost a cop a day shot in this country, which is insane. So there's a couple of takeaways there. One is, and you were already talking about this, but just tactical medicine.
mhm,
We do a better job ourselves, the law enforcement officers. I think our medics, our paramedics are better trained. And I think we have better medicine. We're able
mhm,
to save cops, But a lot of those cops never come back to the job, do they? They're never able to.
Right. It's kind of like I mentioned earlier with the driving. We've got officers that you don't hear about those statistics because no one tracks them. It's they don't track. Well, hey, this officer they may track officer shop, but they don't track. Did they come back to work full duty, or are they on permanent disability? Are they in a temporary assignment for the rest of their career? They don't track those numbers, so that's where it kind of gets interesting. But certainly, the ambush situation is real. I'm in Ohio, and in May of 25, we had 3 officers killed in Ohio, 3 in our state, and all 3 were ambush style. One officer was working a traffic detail when he was targeted by an individual. Another one was on a domestic, walking up to the house, and the third one, he and his partner were what we call doored up. You remember that term, right? Doored up, side by side, and they were having lunch when they were ambushed, shot and killed 1, injured 2 more. So, kind of going back to that complacency word, you know, directing traffic, or excuse me, Deputy Henderson wasn't even directing traffic. He was working the traffic control box when this criminal murdered him, just plowed him over, and just,
Yeah, he wasn't even shot. He was
no,
murdered
no,
by
he was,
using a vehicle. Yeah.
yeah, he was struck by a vehicle, but how quote unquote routine is directing traffic? How quote unquote routine is sitting in the parking lot having lunch? And I look at I like to look at lessons learned, and then I also have to say this: there are some things that just happen, and those are 2 great examples right there, and they're not great by any stretch of the imagination. That there's nothing those officers could have done to prevent that, right? I mean, you can't prevent sitting in your car having lunch, getting ambushed with a rifle from how many hundred feet away or whatever the case is, directing traffic. You can't possibly know that this is going to, those are the ones that really scare the what out of me, because there's nothing I can teach an officer. There's hardly anything I can reinforce to a police officer that says, hey, don't do this, right? We can talk about slowing down. We can talk about parking away from scenes. We can talk about not pulling up to the front door of alarm drops and things like that. But having lunch, I mean, short of saying, hey, come back to the police department and don't eat in public, how do I teach that, right? How do you train that? Hardest, my friend says this is the hardest job in America, and he is spot on, spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. We also have officers die in by other types of assaults, right? We had several stabbed. Correctional officers. We had a number of correctional officers killed as well, either with knife, sharp objects, or with just going hands on with somebody, choked to death, beaten to death, things like that. So it's not just always gunfire we're looking out for, right?
Right, 100%. I'm proud of my agency. We are actively practicing hand-to-hand combat multiple times a year, BJJ, ground fighting. We're testing out the new Bola wrap right now as an intervention tool. We always are looking for the latest and greatest. And I think, as a leader, I believe I owe it to my people to make sure that they have the tools and the equipment to do their job to the best of their ability. So there's that side of the house. The other side of the house is like, hey, if this product is going to keep my people safe, then why would I not try to apply it? And but yeah, you're right. And there's not enough hours in the day to give our officers all the training they need. But and this may rub some of your listeners the wrong way, and I apologize. But if your people haven't practiced handcuffing or self-defense since the police academy, and that's been 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, I'm telling you right now, when they need that tool and they need that technique, they are not going to be successful, right? They're just that muscle memory that ship has long sailed. And that also kind of frustrates me when I see some of these cases, because our good friend Gordon Graham says predictable is preventable, right? And it's like, man, if you haven't practiced X, Y, and Z, and then it happens, well, it's predictable, right? What's going to occur. So therefore, does it become preventable if on the front end you would have done something? So I think a lot of states are making some changes. They're trying to go in the right direction. We just have got such a long way to go. And Betsy, it comes down to money. It comes down to funding, right? I mean, for me to take an officer off the street and put him in a specialized training for 8 hours, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, there's I got to backfill that. I have to pay overtime, or I got to pull somebody in for a different assignment. Now you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. So again, we have a long way to go, I think, to get there. I am excited though when I see what some states are doing with continuous training and making sure we're getting something. I don't think you get that sitting in front of a webinar, but we are making some progress in some states, and some I think still have a long way to go, and it all comes down to dollars, in my opinion.
Well, and we're always going to have thousands of police officers in this country whose agencies aren't going to be able to send them to training. And again, we talked about this. All these police departments that are short staffed, especially these large agencies, they can't send a police officer to training or take them off the street because they're already working them, you know, 12, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week or more. So we've got that issue. But one of the things that I know you've always emphasized, I've always emphasized, is if you're a cop, you're going to have to get your own training yourself sometimes. If you want
Yeah.
to stay alive, if you want to stay healthy, if you want to stay in one piece, if you want to get to retirement, you're going to have to invest in yourself, right?
Yeah, 100%. I was going to say the exact thing. You got to invest in yourself. It's no different than going to the gym and working out. I mean, you do that on your own. I know I got some guys that do the BJJ, the ground fighting stuff on their own. I got guys that go to the range on their own. I got guys that are doing whatever it is, and in this line of work to make themselves better to perfect their craft. And I wish I could sit here and say, don't worry about it. The department will take care of you. But again, it comes down to bodies working the street, and it comes down to money. And, until, and that is probably more of a systemic issue, right? That has to change. And what that looks like, I don't know what that looks like. Does, different hours, different schedule that police officers work. I don't know, but yeah, you have to invest in yourself and take pride, because, every one of you has someone at home who wants you to come home, and someone who loves you more than anybody else, and they want to see you at the end of your shift. And we can't take that for granted. So, kind of back to the below 100, it's those fundamentals. Remember those fundamentals, and you'll significantly increase your chances of survival, and just not getting hurt in general, right? It's um, and that's part of it. And we've talked a couple of times now about this, and we always hear about the deaths, but let's not forget the ones that are out there that are permanently disabled and who will never walk again. They'll never drive again. They'll never breathe on their own again, or whatever the case might be. And those situations are just as tragic as an officer killed in line of duty. So remember the fundamentals. Absolutely.
As of this taping, we have lost one police officer in the line of duty, a Texas constable, shot and killed outside of a bar in Texas. So, but we're going to be looking this year to maintain that below 100 while we hope to continue to see more support for the American law enforcement officer. Crime is down. We're seeing, homicide went down in every major city in 2025. In a lot of those same big cities, we're seeing property crime go down. We're seeing carjackings go down. So hopefully crime will continue to go down, right? And officers killed in the line of duty will keep it below 100 for another year.
That would be fantastic if we never have to talk about higher than 100, right? I mean, one's too many. But to your point, keeping it below 100 when you're averaging 150 to 180 a year, that is a huge number. That's a great decrease. So, kudos to everyone out there who's doing it right and doing it the right way. Kudos to the leaders who have embraced training and have embraced their officers' safety as their number one priority. Again, I always say when I teach leadership classes, your people are the most important thing you got. Without them, you got nothing. They're your most important resource, and you can't ever forget that. So sergeants, out there backing up your officers, making sure they got what they need, they're doing it the right way, not being afraid to have those hard conversations when you see someone do something incorrectly. Again, this is probably another podcast, but that's another issue is, sergeants, you got to get out of the office. you can't see what your people are doing if you don't see them work. And watching a body cam footage or reviewing a dash cam isn't the same as standing there next to them working and making those corrections as needed. That's why you exist as a leader, and that is what will help keep this number below 100 for sure.
Absolutely. And for the citizens watching, make sure that you're supporting your local cops. You're thanking them for what they do. You're going to those city council meetings and you're taking a look at that police budget, and you're making sure that as a citizen, that your cops, the people protecting you and your community, are able to get that training. They're able to get those mental health resources, those physical resources that they need to be able to do a good job for their community. Chief, where can people find you on social media? Where can they find your consulting company? You're all over the place, and you're always one of my favorite followers on or follows on X.
Yeah, so on X, it's simple. It's Chief S. Hughes. So Chief S. Hughes. LinkedIn is just my name, Scott Hughes. But the easiest thing to do would be go to crosdenconsulting.com, and you can find all the social media links there.
I tell you what, I can't thank you enough for being my first guest of the year and talking about something that that I know is near and dear to both our hearts. I'm hoping we're talking at the beginning of next year where we've got those officers killed and injured stats even lower. So thanks so much for being with me. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, you can visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.